Fear is a fascination. We seek it out and indulge ourselves in it to escape the mundane problems of our everyday lives. Fiction provides a veil that we can glimpse through that separates us from the horrors within the story. It enables us to read or watch them, safe in the knowledge that things like that could never happen to us. At least, that was my mentality. Not anymore. Not after what I've experienced. Even in our brightly lit, real world, far removed from the accounts of monsters, mysteries, and ghosts that populate this forum, shadows still exist. They lurk just out of our periphery vision, unnoticed, but waiting to envelop us into a nightmare from which there is no awakening. It had been on a July day 3 years ago that I had been driving down the interstate, as I had taken to doing that year. The sun streamed through my window, forcing me to pull down my driver's mirror to stop squinting. I had no destination in mind, only content to soak up the passing scenery. I had been distracted by the hypnotic bob of the oversized plastic head of the Darth Vader figurine that stood on my dashboard that I almost didn't notice the skidding tire tracks that sharply verged off the road ahead through a smashed gate and flattened the grass of the nearby field. It was only when I looked to the left that I made out the shape of the car under the massive oak tree it was pinned to, a pillar of black smoke drifting up from its crumpled hood into the sky. I pulled in so fast that I'm still surprised my car didn't end up rolling off the road with it. As the wind shifted direction, rustling the swaying grasslands, it carried with it hysterical shrieks. I shifted my foot, only to flinch as a deflated squeak burbled up from underneath my heel. I lifted my foot and my heart stopped. A small duck toy stared up at me, the bright purple of its compressed rubbery body caked with dirt. I must have broken at least 2 Olympic world records in my sprint towards the car, the screams growing ever more deafening as I neared it. Stray shards of glass crunched beneath my feet with the soft grasses. Squinting through the smashed driver's window, I was able to make out a woman's body slumped over, still belted in.
Hey, is anyone alive in there?
Her head shuddered upright with a pained, zombie-like moan. Her blonde hair was streaked red from the massive gaping wound on her forehead. Dozens of miniature pearly fragments were scattered on the gray expanse of the dashboard underneath her, which I initially assumed to be beads. But on closer inspection, I realized they were her teeth.
My baby,
she garbled out through a mouth filled with shattered enamel and pooling blood. Her trembling, bloodied fingers clawed at the belt buckle in a futile attempt to free herself.
No,
I croaked out.
Don't move.
I rushed to the back and started pulling on the door, inwardly preparing myself for whatever horrific sight awaited me, one that I knew would probably take years for me to recover from. After a prolonged struggle, the passenger door swung open. A golden-haired toddler, no more than 2 years old, was comfortably held in her car seat, her booted feet dangling over the edge. She was blissfully unaware of the horror of her current situation, with her only consternation being trying to retrieve her Paw Patrol plush toy that had become lodged underneath the front passenger seat, her chubby fist stretching out towards it. Not even the smallest scratch marred her rosy cheek. I sagged with relief, with the only solid frame of the vehicle keeping my body upright. A pitiful whine diverted my attention back to the front of the car. The woman was trying to wriggle up out of her seat, the bloody white head of her shattered femur jutting out of the torn denim covering her thigh.
My baby,
she whined. She's fine, I told her. Look for yourself. She's not even bruised. I hovered a hand over the little girl's tiny head, trying to redirect her scattered interest to her daughter, who blinked up at me with large, inquisitive blue eyes. But seeing her unharmed child did little to ease her hysteria.
My baby,
she moaned.
My baby!
While I had been doing my best to try to explain the situation to the 911 operator on my phone, she thrashed wildly in her seat in a futile effort at freeing herself. The sounds that were coming out of her didn't sound human. There was no reason left, just pure animal desperation. After a while, I realized that there were intelligible words interspersed with the broken whimpers. She was trying to tell me something. She made wild gesticulations with her broken fingers, which curled up like lobster claws. After a few more minutes of enduring my blank expression, her pain was tinged with frustration, and she finally blurted out, "Amy!" As I was struggling to undo the thick straps of the little girl's car seat, I finally noticed the third body in the car. wedged under the front passenger seat. Too small to be an adult. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, dressed for a summer's day out in blue denim shorts and a white t-shirt sequined with lilac flowers, which had darkened to mauve with spilled blood. I could make out her name on her lettered bracelet in all capitals. A-M-Y. Amy. Her skin was already marble cold when I checked her pulse, but I acted on a misplaced hope that she might be saved. After some straining, I managed to free her featherweight body slumping into my arms with all the motor control of a rag doll. I could have accepted seeing a bruised and bloodied face, her blue-tinged swollen lips pursed mid to last breath, but life didn't give us that consolation. There was only a severed neck stem where a human skull had once sat, still spurting weak surges of blood that soaked through my shirt. Her mother's dazed eyes shot open as she realized what she was looking at. She froze in her seat, her mouth agape at the sight of her daughter's headless corpse. Her face whirled through the different stages of grief, denial, anger, depression, before collapsing into hopeless grief. She howled like an animal, clawing frantically at her chest, trying to undo her seatbelt. She lost what little motor control she had, smashing her head into the back of her seat in a miserable spasm until I had to physically grab her hands. "Don't look," I told her, sucking in a breath. "Keep focused on the tree outside. Just don't look next to you." After a few seconds of trembling, she gave me a weak nod, her face streaked with brownish drying blood. She fell forward, burrowing her head as deep as she could into my shoulder to try and block out the sight, her scalding tears dampening my skin, murmurs of her daughter's name interspersed between her shaking sobs. I held her, trying not to peer into the adjacent seat myself. Anxiety pulsed through me as I scanned the back seat of the car for any sign of the girl's missing head. The thought of it having rolled underneath the sight directly into the periphery of her toddler sister caused my entire body to clench up. As I pried myself from the woman's grasp, I went around to the front passenger side with a shattered window. I inspected the taping hole in the middle of the windshield, the once transparent surface webbed with sharp, white cracks, and a sick realization came over me. It wasn't in the car. It had been ejected on impact. I dreaded the thought of sifting through the green to find it. It had to be around here somewhere, I thought. Probably rolled out of our view. Surely a severed head couldn't just disappear. Something splashed against my cheek. Without even thinking, I wiped it away, presuming it to be rain, only to see pale red smeared across my fingers. Despite some part of my brain realizing what it was and screaming at me not to, I forced my rigid neck muscles to look upwards. Silence reigned over us all, the kind that only occurs in the wake of something horrible, just before the immense pressure of reality collapses onto your shoulders. The only natural sound was the creak of the branches that held the terrible sight aloft. An anguished scream tore from Amy's mother's throat, a sound of pure animal anguish. I could spend the rest of my life trying to, but I don't think I could ever be able to transcribe it. I never want to hear anything like it again. Up in the tree was Amy. Her long golden curls had become ensnared on a branch, suspending her severed head in midair, where it swung like a pendulum in the breeze. The hollow scrape of her skull against the bark seemed to blend into the susurration of the grass around us, like some twisted symphony. Her dead and blue eyes held an accusatory element, as if interrogating me through her gaze. Sunken into a bruised, ashen death mask, the last expression she managed before her disconnected neurons had burned out completely. A happy warble permeated through my own clouding grief and horror. From the corner of my vision, in the cracked driver's side view mirror, I saw the young girl in the back seat staring up mesmerized into the elevated branches. She reached up with both tiny hands, trying to pull the swaying object down that blotted out the streaming sunlight that peeled through the leafy awnings. She was oblivious to what it was and ignored her sobbing mother who was slumped in the front seat. I barely even noticed the blue and red flashing in the rearview mirror. That day has hung over me like a dark cloud no matter how much I've tried. It's refused to shift. On weekends, my car just sits in the darkness of my garage. I haven't gone down that highway in a year. I got as far as turning the key in the ignition before I ended up on the floor curled into a tear-soaked ball. Whenever I close my eyes, I see her. Little Amy. The sight of her swinging severed head burns into my mind like a film strip. The life having long vacated from her gaze, accompanied by the faded staccato of her mother's wails. Whenever it happens, that same helplessness crushes down on me like a boulder. The unknown is closer than you think. If you prod at it long enough, it'll lunge out at you. It's something far beyond the cheap computer-generated scares and fake blood-soaked prosthetic that we're all so acquainted with. It's something so much deeper and primal. It's watching a family be rendered apart and knowing you can't do anything to stop it. I've seen the face of true fear, and it's not something easily forgotten.